East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 15th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Reese.
Present.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's work session will begin with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We will then have Jeannie Crozer, our purchasing agent, discuss bids. We'll have a presentation on from the Energy Sustainability Committee about all electric recommendations. We'll have an update on the annual Turkey Trot Run for Fund 5K and another look at the draft Brooks Park Management Plan with Scott Wilson, followed by liaison reports. And we do have a couple of resolutions to approve as well. And we have Richard Schoen signed up first to address the board public comment. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. My name is Richard Shane, actually.
I'm sorry, mispronounced
That's
that.
okay. We've met before. I happen to be chairman of the Board of Fire Commissioners in Montauk. At our last meeting, I was presented with an issue that I felt the board should be made aware of. As you know, Ditch Plains is a very popular area in Montauk. It's become the surfing capital of Montauk. The problem is the parking there is quite limited. And as a result of limited parking, all our visitors, our residents have found another way of accessing Ditch Plains, and that is by bicycle or electric bicycle or motorcycle. And herein lies the problem. Among other things, I drive the ambulance quite often in Montauk. We had a call there 2 weeks ago. Fortunately, it was not a heart call. It was not a spinal injury, both of which we've experienced in the past. But I was presented with a situation that I thought the board should do something about. These bicycles, of which there are many, and if you want, I can show you all pictures of them.
Please.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that is a problem.
Many is understatement.
See, that's the access point to the beach.
That's a problem.
And while we have four-wheel vehicles to access the beach, this makes it impossible. What do we do about it? Well, one, we have to have access to the beach. We can't have a hard call 200 yards down the beach waiting for people to walk down. We did have a spinal injury at another part of town that required medevacing, and that too is a time constraint. But this is a situation that I don't think we can allow to exist. How you address it, I could suggest not allowing bicycles anywhere near the access, for one. You could put up a barricade, making it a beach access only for people and our vehicles to go. You could ban the use of bicycles. I don't see that happening. You could require them to have permits. I don't know if that would relieve the problem. But it's obvious there's an issue there, and not something I can deal with.
Right. We'll take care of that. That's a serious problem, obviously. Was not aware that was going on. On the one hand, we certainly want to encourage people using bicycles to get to the beach to reduce the impacts of parking, but there needs to be appropriate place for the parking of the bicycles.
You might consider turning in one or two of the parking spots into bicycle racks, for example, which would take I mean, kids being kids, they're going to go out, drop the bike off. And
Yeah. So I know David Lease is our council member Lease is our liaison to beaches and also Montauk. So David, I know you're probably more aware.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This came to my light maybe about 2 weeks ago. One of the issues is some of these new bikes, they don't fit the bike racks that we have there right now. They have like a surfboard rack onto the side of it. There's a bike and then a surfboard rack, so they don't go into the spokes. So we're looking at redesigns of that also, using our sweeper and repainting the area as the access point. We can probably even put in maybe, and I could talk to you more offline, but these are discussions that we've had. Emergency access, maybe we put in no bike storage or anything, and taking away parking spots is always an option. There's always a rub to that, but it's come to my attention. We're internally looking at it. I just haven't brought it to the board, and I appreciate you bringing it to us today, Richard.
good.
Yeah.
That's my job.
It is your job, and I appreciate that. We'll get to our job too, Richard.
And
All right, look forward to see what happens down there.
Thank you.
appreciate what you do with the fire department for our community, Richard. Okay, anyone else in the room like to address the board, public comment? Jason, do we have any callers on the line?
Yes, we do. I will unmute the first caller right now. Hello, caller, ending 2471. You are on the air. Hello, caller, ending 2471. You are on the air. I hear something. Hello? All right, one last time because I'm still hearing something. Hello, caller, ending 2471. You are on the air. Hello? Okay. So that's a mystery. Aside from that we have no other callers.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We'll move on to Jeannie Carrozza and bids. Morning, Jeannie.
Okay, we're finally going to get our boat for the harbor master. So it's the acceptance of the bid for the enforcement, search and rescue Port Authority vessel for the Marine Patrol. Invertech Marine Solutions is the apparent low bidder, and the amount is $476,655.78. Next is the harbor master building roof replacement. Conlin Exteriors is the apparent low bidder for that, in the amount of $32,900. Extending the bid for printing of miscellaneous forms, Montauk Printing, Effects of Color, Ridgewood Press, and Concept Print. We're all extending. We also did an RFP for the appraisal services for the Land Acquisition Department for CPF, along with Housing and Community Development. And we have several appraisers that were chosen for that. Patricia Parsons, Clark and Marshall Appraisers, and Lawrence Indemnity Consulting Corp. And there's a range of fees depending upon the assignment. And lastly is a notice for the Parsons Place bioswale repair, which will be available this Thursday. And that's all.
Any questions for Jeannie?
No.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thanks, Jeannie.
For the rest of your day. That brings us up to our next topic, which is all electric recommendations, and this is being presented by members of the Energy Sustainable Committee. We have Lena Tabori and Joan McGivern, and
I believe,
Cheska,
yeah,
is also going to join via Zoom.
via Zoom. She should be in the waiting room, if that's Jason.
Yes, that's me. Give me a second. I don't see her in the waiting room.
Okay. But I think Francesca and Lena can start. Mhm.
Good morning, Lena.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to do this. I'm deeply appreciative. Joan and Francesca and I are part of a subcommittee on the Energy Sustainability Committee that East Hampton created as an advisory committee many years ago. Almost a decade ago, actually. We're going to do this presentation in two parts. We wrote a recommendation to the town board, and we sort of reorganize that into a PowerPoint presentation so that we'll take you through the recommendation. And then we have a series of questions which, for which we have answers, which are the most common questions as far as we could ascertain that relate to what we're recommending. The recommendation essentially is that we electrify all of our buildings, but this particular recommendation only focuses on new construction. So just so that everyone is not confused, it is new construction as defined in Suffolk County and in East Hampton, not all construction that already exists. So the purpose of the act is to support the electrification of all energy use. The action that we're asking you to take is to eliminate fossil fuels from all new construction. The requirements are that all appliances, including heating and cooling systems, hot water, and stoves become and are all electric in new construction. The result of making those changes is that we will contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases and air pollution, which, as we probably all know by now, is something that we've not only set a goal for ourselves within East Hampton almost a decade ago, but the world is definitely on that same page. The start date that we are requesting is January 1st, 2025, which hopefully will give everyone enough time to pull themselves together. The why is the health of the planet, it's the health of our residents, it's the future. The unanimous recommendation by the East Hampton and Sustainability Committee wrote, in accordance with the town goals, in 2013, the town adopted the comprehensive energy vision to move the town forward as a leader in sustainability, energy policies, and practices. In 2014, the town became the first municipality in New York State to adopt a code to meet the equivalent of 100% of economy-wide energy consumption, such as electricity, heating, and transportation, with renewable energy sources by 2030. It is astonishing to me that the town could have been so prescient when so much of the rest of the world was not. I'm unbelievably proud, I have to say, to be a resident. In 2017, the town adopted the Climate Action Plan into the comprehensive plan. So it's now baked in, essentially. In 2017, the town code was amended to include the energy savings program requiring newly built or substantially reconstructed dwellings to meet the HERS index. The HERS index is something that was established by New York State, and we are in compliance. In the UN's 2022 climate report detailing the massive shifts necessary to cut the world's emissions, its number 2 step was to decarbonize buildings. And in accordance with the New York State goals, in 2023, New York State became the first state in the nation to ban gas from new construction through legislation. It's not that it hadn't happened in other states, but not through legislation. So this was fairly dramatic. It passed into law when the New York State's 23-24 budget was passed in May this year. California and Washington had previously adopted bans through their building codes, but not through legislation.
Lena, could you just let Anne-Marie know when to advance the slides?
Sorry, that's why. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, she's keeping up.
You hang in with me. What do you want me to do to let you know?
Say next slide.
Oh, next slide, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was following, but kind of lost it that minute.
Okay, so we're on the because slide. That's next. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Because electric appliances, i.e. hot water heaters, induction stoves, cold climate heat pumps, they produce no on-site CO2, methane, or other greenhouse gases. And because electrifying appliances reduces indoor air pollution, improves health, the EPA and numerous other groups, including Harvard, Stanford, produced reports that gas-burning stoves, just to mention induction stoves, which I know is a hot topic for everyone, in kitchens across America, they may pose greater risks to the planet and public health than previously thought, including emitting significant amounts of nitrogen dioxide, a pollutant that can trigger asthma and other respiratory conditions. Methane emissions from gas stoves in the United States have a comparable climate impact to about 500,000 gas-powered cars driven for a year, and that children living in homes with gas stoves are 42% more likely to experience asthma. Electrical appliances are safer, cleaner, and have a smaller carbon footprint. Without fossil fuels, there is better indoor air quality and no chance of a dangerous gas leak or carbon monoxide poisoning. Next slide. And because there is state, federal, and utility economic support, rebates, credits, or incentives are available through the IRA and NYSERDA, as well as PSEG, for the purchase and installation of all electric heating, cooling, and water heating appliances, as well as other related clean energy technologies, such as electrical panels, vehicle chargers, and more. We haven't been hasty in making this recommendation. Perhaps we've been slow, but it's been pending for a year. We first drafted it last summer, and then we postponed it, waiting for the state law to pass and for other potential litigations from the fossil fuel industry to take place. The recommendation specifically, sorry, oh, you are so with me, Anne. The recommendation specifically calls for a start date 1 year earlier than New York State's. So the state law goes into place on the 1st of January, 2026. Ours asks for 2025. We kind of like being first. We were first 10 years ago and sort of like being first again. Notwithstanding the state's exemptions, it calls for when an improvement meets or exceeds the threshold defined in our own town code, section 255120. For a substantial improvement, the requirements of this new provision shall apply as if the construction were new construction. It also specifically calls for the town's building codes to support the electrification of all energy use through the installation of energy-efficient electrical appliances, such as cold climate heat pumps, whether air source or geothermal, for space heating and cooling, domestic hot water production, as well as induction stoves for cooking. The recommendation specifically recognizes that electricity is not currently clean, which is to say it is still a mixture of fossil fuels, hydrogen, nuclear, and renewables. As the sources of energy continue to shift towards clean and renewable energy, the percentage of fossil fuels will be reduced. If we don't have a vehicle for that reduction of fossil fuels to move, we won't be doing the right thing. So it's going to jumpstart the town towards this shift. The current East Hampton code for new construction impacted. We entered into the recommendation the current definitions so that everybody would know exactly what they are at this moment. They are also in compliance with Suffolk County, I should maybe add. And it says, the code currently says, any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of the improvement. The term includes structures which have incurred substantial damage, regardless of the actual repair work performed. The term does not, however, include either any project for improvement of a structure to correct existing violations of state or local health, sanitary, or safety code specifications, which have been identified by the local code enforcement officer and which are the minimum necessary to assure safe living conditions, or any alteration of a historic structure, provided that the alteration will not preclude the structure continued designation as a historic structure. I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep with all that. I know that there are all these details that simply have to exist.
We live code.
Yeah.
It's our language.
It's your language. So this was written and submitted by myself, Francesca, and Joan. We're all members on behalf of the Energy and Sustainability Committee. They were kind enough to unanimously pass this. And if it's all right with you, we will move on to the question and answer section of this. We had included with the original recommendation an addendum, and we've used that addendum, which you can all access through the East Hampton website, to provide sort of quick and dirty answers to a lot of the questions which just keep coming up. Like, for example, what's a heat pump? And so we thought, they're an energy efficient alternative to furnaces and air conditioning for all climates. So it's kind of ridiculous that they're called heat pumps when they also function for air conditioning. So what heat pumps do, which is also a little counterintuitive to think about, is they take in the summertime the cold air out of the hot air that's outside, and they take it inside. In the wintertime, they do exactly the opposite. They go out to the cold air, they take the hot air out of it, and they bring it into the house. So what you're doing is transferring heat. That's essentially what they do. So they don't create heat, they transfer heat. They move it, yeah, they collect, yes, okay. For every 1 kilowatt hour of electricity that a heat pump uses, it produces 2 to 4 kilowatt hours of heat energy, making it up to 4 times more efficient than a regular boiler or a furnace. NYSERDA also has created a section on heat pumps, which is very useful. And they basically ask the question, are you using oil, propane, or electric baseboards as your primary heating source? If so, heat pumps are better. They're a more efficient way to keep your home comfortable all year long without the use of fossil fuels. That information is in the addendum, even as we are not focused on your having to make this change in your own home, if your own home already exists. This is basically focused on new construction and extremely extensive renovations. I put heat pumps in myself 3 years ago, which basically eliminated almost all my National Grid bill, except for that which continues to fuel, I'm sorry to say, my gas stove, which I plan to replace next summer with an induction stove. There is a clean heat section also in New York State, which talks about the benefits. I should mention that hot water heaters also use electricity to move heat from one place to another instead of generating heat directly. Therefore, they too can be 2 to 3 times more energy efficient than conventional water heaters. A stove, what is an induction stove? Well, according to Consumer Reports, every single induction stove and induction range that they've tested through our lab delivers fast hot cooktop heat and superb simmering. What's more, if you buy a new induction cooktop or range, you may be eligible for financial incentives created by the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of people are worried about whether or not they have to exchange their cookware if they put an induction stove in, which is electric, but not the same kind of electric as your grandmother used, or perhaps you even still have. I was going to say, or perhaps you still have in your home. I use a lot of wrought iron, and I use a lot of cookware that has a copper base, so those are magnetic, and consequently you have no issue. Okay, we're going to move over to Francesca, who's taking question number 2. Why make the change?
Jason, do we have Francesca?
No one has joined the Zoom link at all. I was wondering if it was perhaps the person who called in earlier, but they're no longer on the line. And consequently, I have an induction cooktop, and the way I test my my cookware is I put a magnet up to it before I buy it.
You are brilliant. Thank you so much. That's what we needed. Someone who's happy.
If you need any kind of technical advice on anything, we can rely on Chase.
Yes.
That's a tall order.
All right. Well, we could save question 2 for later, just in case Francesca hops on. She's got 2 and 3, I think. So I'll move on to question 4, and then we'll turn it over to Joan, who I think has questions after that. So this question was, question 4 is why shift, oh, you don't have a PowerPoint for this. Question number 4 is why shift to electricity when so much electricity is still fueled by fossil fuels? I answered that a little bit earlier because within the recommendation itself, I point out that although sort of better than 50% of our current electricity is fueled by fossil fuels, that's changing almost by the minute. Where we were is that in 2020, natural gas contributed 40%, while nuclear provided 30% and hydroelectric 22%. And where we're going is that New York State has a zero emission electricity grid by 2040. And on the way there, we are expected to reduce the cities, that's in New York City's reliance on fossil fuel by more than 50% by 2030, pushing towards the goal of having 70% of the state's electricity fueled by renewable sources by 2030. Part of this is happening. Okay, well, part of this is happening because we're increasing our hydro, which is great with Canada. So that's kind of the answer to that question. Okay. Joan?
Just one more point about that. I think part of the idea of setting goals for new construction is that when you put in, while these changes are happening to our electric grid, to become more, to reduce our fossil fuel use there, the average lifespan of a heating system, 20 years. Mm-hmm. So you're locking in now the continued use of fossil fuels on your heating and your cooling, particularly on your heating. If you build now, even though the law changes, if we didn't do anything in the state level in 26, we're grandfathered. These systems will outlast that change and will go on for another 20 years past the time of the change. So the idea would be to transition the users, is particularly in heating for me, to that goal while the house is being built, and not kind of putting that 20-year fossil fuel system in place now.
So that's brilliant, because obviously, although the recommendation is focusing on building new construction, what Kate is pointing out is that you can take advantage of all the rebates and incentives that are available for this technology right now, if you have a reason to replace what you currently have in your home. I feel this way about electric cars too. If you're going to buy a new car, why not buy an electric one? It doesn't mean that if you have a perfectly good running car, you should toss it in the dump right at this moment, but
it's kind of similar to what we're doing with our own HVAC systems in our municipal buildings, where we're leading by transitioning. When we have HVAC systems, we've done a study, and as our HVAC systems come to the end of their useful life, and we have to replace them, we're transitioning to all electric now, so we don't put in another 20 years of fossil fuel use for that particular structure.
See that? I am a resident in an extremely smart town. Okay, on to Joan.
One of the questions is, are other states doing it? And obviously, to the extent Lena already talked about New York, I won't talk about that, but it is about leadership. And in addition to New York, there are 5 other states and also Washington, D.C., an aspiring state, that have taken essentially the same steps we're recommending through different mechanisms, but the result is the same. And I'm going to identify a couple examples. Should I do? I'm going to do some of the cities first, because Francesca isn't on the line. In New York City, buildings lower than 7 stories are going to be forced to go electric, essentially by limiting their overall emissions by January of this year, and buildings over 7 stories by July of 2027. How that interacts with the state laws it will be an interesting issue. But in any event, Ithaca, New York, which is known to be a front runner on some of these issues, on climate issues, has voted to decarbonize every single building by 2030, which is pretty aggressive. Beacon in Dutchess County is requiring all new construction and major renovations, which is what we're recommending, but they've already done that by March 2023. In terms of states, California has enabled, through legislation, 50 cities to move forward to ban gas. California's building code of 2022 basically forces heat pumps into new construction. Colorado is targeting having 60% of the market share for heat pumps by 2030. So again, directly or indirectly forcing a conversion of housing. Maine has one of the most ambitious targets for any state in New England, and hoping to be on track for using 80% of renewable sources of electricity by 2030. Massachusetts has done something similar to California in terms of allowing cities and towns to ban fossil fuels, as well as force electrification. And Washington has become the first state in the country to mandate electric heat pumps for all new buildings, and that was late last month. So that was in June. No, April, excuse me, late. That was a news article from May 2022. And in Washington, D.C., they've passed a bill similar to New York's budget bill. So I guess all of this should illustrate to you that states are taking a leadership role, as well as enabling towns and cities to take a more aggressive leadership role, which is what we're recommending that the town do. I don't know if you have any more questions on states.
Do you guys have any questions?
I got a couple, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First one is, I know, so this came up in one of my discussions with friends over a beer, right? Everyone has their own opinions, and it was builders, environmentalists, everyone telling them their thoughts, which is great to hear. One of them is everyone's very nervous about what this would do to our current grid right now. Putting this much more power into our grid, are we ready for it? Individuals drive down Long Lane and still see the smokestacks coming off from the peaker plants. Does this mean that we're going to be putting more need into the grid and the peaker plants are still going to be going? Where's the trade-off on there? And has been outreach to LIPA, PSE&G, and such that they can confirm that our grid, specifically in East Hampton, is prepared for this, if not even on the recommendations of your committee, but also on the need of, and now the legislation of the state?
Well, the short answer is that's a Francesca question.
Okay.
I'm here. I had.
Yay.
I'm so sorry. I didn't
Just in time.
come the first time. Yes,
Don't have to
I'm
phone
ready
her
to
through
go.
answering.
Okay, I had somebody came to the door. I had to deal with an emergency that has just come up. So, so the question is about the grid. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I'll restate it, Francesca, if you don't mind. It's that, have we done outreach to LIPA, PSE&G, Keyspan, and others as far as our electric grid? And discussion was, are we still going to need to use peaker plants? Are we prepared for it? Are we prepared for when the state was legislating? But would we be prepared for our grid to be strong if we follow your recommendations?
It's really a question about
Yeah.
capacities, the
Yeah,
local have
absolutely.
capacity.
So the first thing, I'm still kind of bringing up my thing here, but I'm going to talk just extemporaneously off my. LIPA has done a study of this. It's called a decarbonization, a study of decarbonization. LIPA is prepared to handle decarbonization in Suffolk County on the scale that we're talking about and even more through to 2030. Now, by 2030, a lot of things are going to have changed in any case. For one thing, electric vehicles are going to be on the road that will actually supply power to houses, and there's a lot of talk about integrating them into the grid so that we won't ever need peaker plants because they'll be able to use electric vehicles. But at this point, that's not in existence right now. Those are plans. But what it does say is that this space is really modernizing quite quickly. And LIPA feels completely comfortable. In fact, they prefer to have this kind of electrification because our problem on the East End is summer peaks. And that's why the peaker plants are there, to handle a few days in the summer from too much electricity use, largely from, really big estates. Whereas if people transition to heat pumps, what that will mean is there will be a winter peak. Now, we have far fewer people living out here, even after COVID, in the wintertime than we do during the summertime. And so just for that reason alone, it will be a much easier load on the grid to have this kind of technology than it would be to.
I just have to interrupt you there. I might respectively disagree with that, because during the wintertime, a lot of these houses still have to be heated, no matter if people are in the house or not in the house. So there still is going to be a load that would be on the system, either if it's brown energy or if it's electric energy moving forward. So I think there still is going to be a capacity or a need for increased electricity during the wintertime, even if individuals aren't using their houses as much.
Well, that's not what LIPA says. I just have to say, LIPA has really looked at this and examined it, and they don't see that that's a problem. Not only that, these heat pumps can be really integrated into the grid with smart technology in a way that can actually smooth, smooth the use, electrical use. With people, if you have a house that's unheated, people are not heating it to 80 degrees in the winter or even 78 degrees. They're keeping it down to 65 or, even lower. So LIPA does not anticipate any problem, and they have had their experts really look at this. Not only that, the other issue is that these systems are 300 to 500% more efficient than, where you have the most efficient gas, and of course, gas versus electrification, no. But just to give you an idea, the most efficient gas furnace is maybe 85% efficient. These heating systems are 300 to 400%, 300 to 500%. In other words, they put out 3 to 5 times the amount of energy than the energy that they use. So this is, one of the reasons why it is good for the grid to have this kind of transition, not the other way around. So there are many reasons. One is they have enough capacity to 2030. The technology is rapidly increasing, and efficiencies are already much higher now than they were when I just 5 years ago got a heat pump to heat and cool my home. And and there's going to be the kind of technology that will actually be able, smart technology and technology to be able to integrate this kind of electrification into the grid in a way that's actually advantageous to the grid.
David, to your point precisely, LIPA said in their report, building electrification is expected to add less than 5% to the winter peak load through 2029, an amount that is routinely accommodated in LIPA's grid planning. They also provide incentives specifically for heat pumps themselves, and the information about those the incentives are in the addendum on pages 2 and 3. I doubt very much that they would be putting themselves into a position of providing incentives to shift to this technology if they didn't feel that they could handle the technology.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
That said,
I switched to a heat pump in one of my small cottages, and the total amount of cost was less from a heat pump than what it was propane for the winter.
Yes.
I was surprised by that, honestly. I just want to make sure that there's going to be residents out there that are going to be asking questions of this, and it'd be nice to see if LIPA would do that and specifically state that for our town. That's just one of the questions that have come up as we've discussed this.
Yes,
And one of
it's true. The report doesn't specifically say East Hampton, but it does, I mean, they basically deal with this, yeah.
Sure.
Long
So
Island, so-
they anticipated, the growth and expansion of need for electrical supply some years ago, and that was the whole impetus behind finding other sources of power generation, which ultimately they chose offshore wind, which is the South Fork Wind Farm, and that will be coming online shortly. But that's enough to supply electricity for the entirety of the South Fork alone. And so I think, they've looked at ways of building capacity and doing so with renewable energy, and this is part of that whole plan. I think it's really important for us to answer that question for the public, because I know that comes up because they see that, there have been issues with supply, especially in the summertime in the last several years. The utility has put additional generation and battery storage online to accommodate that demand. But that's really until, the wind farm comes online. That will really, I think, take some of the stress and load off the system at that point. But that's a question that I know has come up for me as well from members of the public. So I think that's something that we need to do a better job addressing, publicizing. I did switch to a heat pump myself for my swimming pool a couple of years ago. Not that we heated our swimming pool very often, but it was set up originally with propane. And it's incredibly efficient. It's very low cost when we do use it, although I'm not sure we'll need it till October or November if we keep the pool open that long, because it's gotten so warm climate-wise. We really don't need any supplemental heat in the swimming pool. But, the other interesting thing about the heat pump for a swimming pool particularly is that it's adding the heat to the pool, and at the same time it's blowing very cold air into the atmosphere, which kind of counterbalances some of the additional heat that we see. Combustion in general to heat adds that additional heat to the atmosphere as a byproduct through a chimney. When you have a heat pump, it's not quite the same.
It's
different.
curious because the humidity in my house, which is cooled by the heat pumps, is eliminated. So, and that's a sort of another little
side
piece of
benefit.
things, yeah. But I think the point about the grid is a very critical one, and it's one that's being discussed nationally, because the grid issues nationally, we are a country where we've got 5 separate grid structures. We don't have one national grid that the federal government can just deal with as one national grid. So there's lots of conversation out there about how the utilities are going to do what they need to do, because this needs to be done throughout the country. It's not just here. We just happen to be, in a certain sense, more fortunate because we have one grid structure within our Long Island area that we can have an impact on.
So the other question that's been raised is the consistency between any local law and that of state law. Is state law going to be implemented through the state building code, as is the case with other energy initiatives, and are there going to be any inconsistencies? I know that if it's a state building code, that local governments don't have the ability to have a more restrictive code. So, I think that's something, again, that we need to look at to make sure that there's consistency between those two, depending on how it's presented.
Could I say something about that then? Hello?
Sure, absolutely, Francesca.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's an important point, and actually, it's one that has not really fully been decided. I think at this point, there is a lot of, in fact, were public hearings going on recently around the building code, and how to, how that's going to pan out in New York State. And I think so. The one issue that would be involved in, I'm not sure that is an issue with the timing of this, because there are two other municipalities in New York State who already have electrification on their, are already doing that new building electrification thing. It more comes with the issue of what constitutes new building. We do have a more restrictive code here in Suffolk County. So I think that's something we absolutely need to look at. So would you be saying that if we have a more restrictive code, basically the New York State legislation says that a new building is something that is completely new, there was nothing on the property beforehand, it doesn't cover gut renovations, which we feel is really kind of an issue because we have so many tear downs here. It isn't a lot of new land, undeveloped land that's being developed. It's stuff that's being rebuilt. So is that going to be a problem? Is that what you're, do you know the answer to that, or is that what you're?
I think my point is that, it's great to be first, and but with the caveat that, if the state comes out with legislation or an initiative, it may require us to revisit ours and adjust it to be consistent. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So a couple of things on that, if I may. So in the zoning code work group, we're collecting data on vacant lots or undeveloped lots across the town. We've collected data. Peter, the numbers that you're always citing is like we're at 93% build out, 7%. So that is true. That works out when we do the actual hard data, which we'll be presenting when we do the zoning code work groups. So we're probably looking at about approximately 1,000 undeveloped lots out of our 20,000, and these are round numbers, existing buildable lots. So that's where we are in that idea of new construction. But for me, I think it would be interesting to look at the code when you do demo a house, which we're seeing more of that demo and build new, how that fits into these definitions. But I think for me, I don't look at never look at where we are in doing things, whether we're first or second or whatever, but I do see a potential for, as I said, looking at on our new builds and the reconstruction development that's happening now, including demo, which is to the earth, and then a rebuild, considering having for heating and cooling, having those transition already in place, because of the idea that it's not like people are going to say, oh, well, I'll have this for a year and then I'll change over to when the state requires it. We are setting those systems in place for the lifetime of that system until people renew. Now we're also making it more difficult when those systems end for people to switch over to the transition of that's coming down the line because they piped their house to the old system. So I actually see this as a positive for folks looking to build new structures in the town and not onerous.
So Kate, you brought up a really interesting point, I think, when you talked about life expectancy and that it's an investment many times 20 or 30 years. So for new construction, you're amortizing those expenses over a long period of time, versus requiring somebody that, as Alina said, may have a perfectly good car, but just, don't get rid of the perfectly good car because you are getting an electric one. Maybe you transition when you go to replace the car. Well, maybe that's something we should look at as well for heating systems in homes when they've reached the end of their life expectancy, that the replacement of that heating system, where practicable, could be, to a heat pump instead of hydronic heating, oil fired. And, obviously it depends on the type of system you have, but maybe a little further investigation into ways of converting existing when the life expectancy of that heat plant goes up, because, that's where we're going to have the most significant, I think, impacts. When you look at how many new houses are being built, there were 6 permits for the month of July for new houses. As you said, we're getting down to the last few without some kind of major zoning density changes, which I don't anticipate. You've got how many other homes already built? Is it 18,000, 20,000? So
it feels in some way, because 6 permits in July, this feels so small, and the 1,000 that Kate suggested, so small, all the more reason to do this as quickly as we can, because let's catch as many 6 per month as we possibly can going forward. And I love the idea of, we need to create some educational, we talk a great deal about educational materials, and I think if we can use this recommendation in a way as opening up that conversation, opening up that educational conversation, then maybe many of the things that you and Kate are talking about in terms of replacing existing equipment when it needs to be replaced with electric instead of with some form of fossil fuel, we're really doing a much, much better thing than just the 6 per month that we're talking about.
And I would liken it to what our initiative on septic upgrades. New construction requires IA, low nitrogen septic systems, but we've also offered incentives for people to convert existing systems to low nitrogen. So, keeping an eye on that kind of effort, getting the conversion of existing systems to more efficient, and doing it in a way that incentivizes it, gives subsidies perhaps. We are going to be beginning to receive monies once the offshore wind farm is energized. The town will be receiving money that can be used for improving our renewable energy portfolio and to convert and assist our community become more sustainable.
As a member of the Energy and Sustainability Committee, we are dying to become a part of those decisions. And the idea that some of them may focus on incentives, I think, is genius. It's genius for leaf blowers, for garden equipment, for heat pumps, for so much that would accelerate us towards our own goals of 2030. I know Joan had a couple of...
And just one more thing, I also believe even before that happens, I just want to also make sure the public understands that there are incentives already that people can use to convert to all electrification on the federal government level and on particularly.
Oh, yes, of course, but we're talking about East Hampton. I love the idea that the town itself would become one of the sources of support, really, for people who can't afford otherwise to do this.
Well, that's certainly something, I think the board will be discussing and looking at, because I think anytime you can help incentivize people, it's less onerous, it's less of an impact on their bottom line, and it reaps benefits for everyone. And, I think that was the whole point of negotiating the community benefits package of, over $29 million with the offshore wind to host that transmission cable, was that we could take that money and leverage that towards advancing and furthering our long-term goals and sustainability here in East Hampton.
Well, as an advisory committee, we would love nothing more than to be a part of whatever advice you might need about where to put the money first and how much and so on. And yeah, that's a brilliant $29 million. I mean, it's over a long period of time, so it's not, everybody should know, available right away, but still in all, it's brilliant. So sorry, I was going to...
If I could just say what we should also just keep in mind in the discussion is that the town is already leading on this, right? So we're building a new 22,000 square foot senior center. It's going to be all electric. The aspiration is that it's going to be net zero. The challenge is the commercial kitchen. It's going to be induction cooking there. We've got the project that David is working on at 395 Panago. That is the 16, affordable houses. That's all electric. When the East Hampton Housing Authority developed the Gansett Meadow project in Amagansett on 27, that's an all electric project. When we talk about the Route 114 project, we're looking at 50 units of affordable housing there. We've already had that discussion. It's going to be all electric. We're putting solar on the houses. the Housing Authority was here just a few weeks ago. They're starting to put solar on all of their projects, starting with the Avalon project. So I think that, as this is, as the state is saying that they're phasing this in, we're kind of phasing this in as well, because we're starting with, we're leading by example.
Yeah, and
as
the
a
HVAC
community and a
system
town.
transition as well.
We did 7
That we're-
studies on that.
Yes,
for-
and we are already in the works to transition the units that have been found to be closest to their end of life.
Right.
So we're phasing it in our town structures as well. So,
Could I just ask a question? I have to kind of push it because nobody can see my hand. I want to ask a question and then make a comment if possible. So you were saying that you're suggesting that we put into this recommendation that add a new thing that anytime in the town of East Hampton, when somebody comes to replace their system, are we talking about a mandate to electrify or not? Because this would be huge to do that, and I actually think it would be incredibly effective. So the question is, 1, is that what you're suggesting? 2, when would it start? And yeah, I'll just go with that for an answer, and then I have a comment afterwards.
So Francesca, I would just suggest that those comments would be further aspirational goals. I think this is a good first step, but I do think there needs to be a hard look at ways that we could even take it further. And I'm not suggesting that be wrapped up and incorporated into this first step. I think, we should look at moving this portion forward, but keep an eye on, what's next and how we can continue to expand beyond just new construction to help incentivize, upgrades and transition to more efficient, greener, cleaner forms of energy. Because we know that, the housing sector is probably the largest contributor at this point within our community in terms of use of fossil fuels, as we already are seeing transitions towards electric vehicles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a sector that we really need to address. So to take this initial step with the idea of what the next steps are.
I would love to keep building on this educational piece as well, because Kathy is talking about the municipality leading. Once again, I don't believe that the residents of this town know that you're leading. I listen to Nextdoor. I get that on a daily basis. I read all the local papers. I listen to the radio. I'm not hearing about the accomplishments of the town. So I really would love to see us become much louder in a good way about what we're doing and why we're doing it, so that people understand and don't just feel that something is being taken away from them or they're being penalized or that we're going to do something that's going to frighten them in some sense or cost them money, but that we're doing things for good reasons, thoughtful reasons, insightful reasons. Sorry, that's enough about that. I'm going to sit down now.
I know Joan's chomping at the bit here. Oh, 1 second, Joan.
Can I just go back to my comment that I wanted to make? Hello?
Go ahead, Francesca, please.
I'm so sorry, but I just want to point out that Beacon was the first Hudson Valley municipality to ban fossil fuels, if nobody else has talked about this before. Their start date is 2024, required all electric construction for all new buildings by then, and it covers all new construction, including major renovations of 75% or higher. So they are already in a more restrictive, not just in start date, but also in the definition of a new building than New York State is. So I'm happy to reach out to Beacon and find out how that was done, given, the difference in the zoning. Is that something that would be helpful?
I'll leave that up for the committee and Kate to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So we could discuss that, Francesca,
Yeah,
and see what next steps, but I think in terms of what your recommendation is here today, I think that I agree with Peter. You know, you're putting forth a particular recommendation today, and I think that is just a first step for developing all the other programs, and looking at how we transition people who are not doing 75% down the line with the incentives that Peter spoke of.
well, I think Beacon was what I was going to bring up, as well as New York City. They have been able to enact laws that are narrow your options for building, which is more restrictive than New York State, but going in the same direction. The other thing I wanted to flag, just to put out as a thought, maybe it's for the zoning committee to consider, that wearing my zoning board hat, sometimes when someone is engaging in substantial renovations or seeking substantial variances,
You're here not wearing your zoning board hat.
no, but from my experience
Understood.
from zoning, that they will offer, even though they're not required to put in a new IA system, putting in a new heating pump system and other energy efficient systems might be a way of offering additional mitigation.
So, but the mitigations are voluntary.
Of course.
I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
So I just have my last two questions. One of them Peter answered is about heat pumps for pools. I wasn't aware of that. So I thank you for bringing that up, because those are always.
I don't know what the incentive is right now, but I think
Yeah.
we got a $950.
We did too.
Yeah, I don't
We
think
did
that
it-
peaks.
That was years ago.
Yeah, that
Oh.
peak saver program ended, but I believe that those incentives, type of incentives are coming back from the utility.
And the other one is that,
And that was a great incentive, by the way.
Yeah.
That was a really
So-
strong incentive. We should all lobby LIPA to bring back peak savers.
so there is a portion of the town's business community that does provide oil, propane, and other services for those type of heating elements. I think that there should be an outreach to them to let them understand this is a situation with the state, potentially the town, and just make sure that they're brought on board, maybe brought into a meeting, advisory committee or such, just to discuss these. They might want to see how it's affect their business long-term, but also so information gets shared and distributed in a very, very educational way instead of a hyperbole way at times also. And I think that's important to bring that energy sector, that some of them are very long-term business owners, brick and mortar, and that would probably help the discussion also too. That would be a recommendation of mine.
Yeah, where the committee and folks that advocate for transition to renewable energy are always very mindful of a just transition and not negatively taking away from something from someone that they rely on. And again, if we're looking at substantial renovation in this particular request, and we're looking at new construction, that doesn't mean that light bulb on off type change. But I do see in the future across the entire state, this is the future of how we heat and use electricity and how we cook. And in the future, this is how it's going. One of the reasons why I'm particularly focusing on, for me, the importance of making it the heating and the cooling immediately is I don't know if we have data on actually how many gas stoves we have in town versus electric. So that's one of the caveats for me. But as far as these large, contributors, and I think that there's plenty of data that shows that burning fossil fuels to heat and cool your home, or essentially to heat your home, is one of the major contributors in our town for specifically for our contribution to greenhouse gases. So I think there is an impetus to move on that as soon as we can.
So what you're suggesting is we're carving off a piece as far as
Well,
this
that's just
just
my feelings.
transition
Yeah.
and the phasing in. It's not like flip the switch and just say all electric by,
Well, no, the proposal doesn't call for that because
Right.
it's talking about new construction and substantial renovation. if you don't do either of those things, and what we're finding in this town, substantial renovation actually is, down to the ground, and a rebuild, that this is, it's not a vacuum. When we talk about stuff, we're finding that out. We know that already through the work in the zoning work group, that is reality. People are taking down the smaller houses and putting up different houses. And so that's a substantial rebuild. So that in itself bakes in a transition rather than a flip switch.
Mhm.
I don't know if this meeting is coming to an end, but
I think we're good.
I would just like to thank you all for listening and talking and contributing. Also, it feels as if the town is completely in the right place with us, and we are encouraged to go forward. There is more. There is more to come.
More to do.
There's always
more to come. I'm so aware that people so often feel that, one little action isn't going to do anything, isn't going to change the world as we know it. But honestly, if we multiply those one actions, it's a little bit like votes. We could have millions of little actions, and maybe we could actually make some serious difference in the way the world is moving.
And how we're really seeing a great illustration of that in a real time right now is with the food scraps program, which is a small pilot program, but Gloria, at last count, we're already up to 1,000 pounds of food scraps being diverted from the waste stream. So every little action piled up together becomes a very large action.
Yeah, thank you.
We
Thank you
really
so much.
appreciate the committee's efforts in trying to help the town move forward and achieve our goals here. And thank you all very much. We'll move on now to our next agenda item, which is the annual Turkey Trot Run for Fun 5K. And we have John Rooney, our Director of Parks and Recreation, to give us an update. I know, John, this is a run that's been going on for quite some time in Montauk, historically on Thanksgiving, and it has really grown. So I'll let you take it from there. I think Councilmember Lease is pulling up a couple of slides to help with your presentation.
I think this year is the 47th.
47?
Yeah, a long time. John Keeshan used to, or somebody used to say that it might be one of the older races on the island, but I don't know that factually, but that's the word on the street anyway. But yeah, so 47 years. But the race just continues to grow. Just to give you a perspective, back in 2006, we had just under 200 people registered, and last year we hit just under 1,000 registered. So over the years, it continues to chip up. Participants is how many runners. So we had 975 actually registered and paid. Not everybody always shows up every year, obviously. So I don't know how many actually ran back in 2006, but that was just how many people had registered for the race. But it just constantly it's just constantly going up. And because it grows, it's great for the community. It's great for our local food pantries who receive the net proceeds from the town for the race. But at the same time, we need to make some adjustments because of these changes. So first one is the fee for the race. So the race has been the same fee since 2016. It's been $10 for pre-registration and $15 for day of race. And expenses have been increasing with the growth of the race. And just to give you an idea of how that's changed, the expenses for the last race that we just had in 2022 was 32% higher than 2021. So just in 1 year, we went up 32%, just about 32% in just expenses for the race. So we need to just change that race fee. I would suggest going to $20. Races that are around the tri-state area, from what I can see, are between $25 and $45, and most of them are around 35-ish. So we're still way under that. But we get every year people are shocked at how inexpensive our race is, and they're actually quite surprised. So going to 20, I think, is completely reasonable. So so that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know the proceeds of the race are donated to the local food pantries organizations. Yep. And that started when I first came on as councilman. the board decided at that point, we should really be making that contribution. It started out with 50%. That was all.
That's right. Yeah, it did. It
That's all
started out
the,
a percentage of it,
the
right?
administration at
And we
that
went-
time would do, although my proposal was for 100%, which then became 100%. And so, you know, I think changing the fee makes a lot of sense. It hasn't gone up in a number of years, and we're well below what, as you said, other races. And again, the proceeds are going to really important community causes, and we don't want to see that contribution from the event, especially since it's taking so many more resources. I mean, you're talking about 200 people running in Montauk versus 1,000 plus. You know, that's a lot more town resources from, you know, our buildings, grounds departments, our police, whatever, emergency services, et cetera. So certainly the moving in the right direction, I think raising that fee. I would only question if that fee is still too low at 20, but I know, you know, having a significant jump from what was extremely low,
Yeah.
people go, oh, it's twice as much. So I understand maybe there's some sensitivity about that.
Yeah, I mean, a family of five was, you know, $50 and now it's going to be $100. So I think that we should consider that. But could you just go over like what the expenses are, like not what the costs actual, but like what contributed to that 32% increase from?
The things that jumped from one year to the next was t-shirt costs. They just almost doubled.
Got it.
So that was just, maybe that's from COVID time. I have no idea, but they
You also have a professional company that does the timing.
We have a timer. They kept the price close to where we had it, but with the increase in registrants, so as people who sign up to do the race, that changes how much you actually pay. So as the numbers go up, that fee goes up.
And we're going to change that registration this year? Is that the plan also? So there's no day of?
That was the second part, yeah. They were just talking about just the cost and everything. But we also have to pay staff. I said we get some volunteers, but we also have staff that are helping with the race. We had also done more with advertising starting last year, and we'll probably keep doing that going forward as well. Because the COVID year, we didn't have to use the medals. We used them in 2021, but we had to buy more medals last year. We'll have to buy again this year. That raised the cost last year as well. So just all these different things factor into what it costs to run the race. And as it grows, it just gets more and more expensive. Just to give you another example of how the expenses have impacted how much money we take in. In 2019, the expenses were about just under 57% of the money we took in. In 2021, 2020 was the COVID year, so we didn't really have any expenses. We didn't have a race that year, just virtual. In 2021, it was just under 53%, and then this past year is 65.8.
Wow.
So it's impacting how much money we're actually taking in.
And then also donating, as Peter mentioned,
right
to the food pantries.
So that's just what the numbers are. So I think we need to react to it. And the other thing the second thing I wanted to bring up that David just mentioned was the same day of race registration. We're one of the few races that actually does this. It was great when the race was small and quaint and local, and you come down and sign up. And now with the amount of people we get in the morning, it's so overwhelming. We've started the last two races actually late because of just getting through registration. It's rough in the morning, and David saw it firsthand 2 years ago when we really got hit, and thank goodness you were there because you became a volunteer, an extra body that morning. Without David, we would have been that much slower. Just one more person makes a difference, believe me.
Yeah, most races now are advanced registration.
It's all registered. I mean, we have online registration, been doing it for years, but the same day registration, it's just,
it's too
slugs it
difficult.
down. And then when you're signing up same day, or even if they were the ones that came in overnight, like they're in there manually typing these things in. They have to be typed into the system prior to the race starting, so then the results are okay and they're not messing up their computer printouts of the order of who runs the race. And
that makes complete sense.
And they make errors.
Given the size of the event now. So pre-registration will be a requirement this year going forward. And we'll just need to make sure we're advertising pre-registration. necessary. There is no on-site registration day of.
What will stay the same is that we will still take donations
Same
day
thing.
of and even for a couple of days after. So that won't change. So
Maybe a temporary signage at the entrance of town with a QR code. Advance of that week of Thanksgiving might also work too for the change.
yeah, we usually set up a sign entering Montauk, and we'll obviously change that verbiage to reflect
Right.
Yeah.
these changes. It'll be on the town website. Obviously, the
Right.
timer puts that out. We get local
David's
coverage.
point, I know this is something we're trying to do wherever we put up signage, is if there's QR code on there for registration, pre-registration, that just makes it
Department's
easier
big
for
part of
folks
that,
to.
yeah. So
Good idea.
We may even want to consider, running ads this year with the QR code in advance so that people, because we really want to get the word out, because it's not just folks from Montauk that are participating in the Turkey
Yeah,
Fun Run.
so which paper do you put it in? New York Times?
Star in the Press.
And granted, look, there probably will be some, if the weather's really good and we're slammed with people, because the weather really determines.
Right.
Sure.
Because like in 2018, it was 18 degrees that morning. And
Wow, it's a little nippy.
that was a rough morning, but we had not a lot of people running.
Did the reporters cover it? Did the reporters cover that?
There were
day,
reporters
18?
there. I
We
don't
had
know.
press.
4 degrees in Vermont, but
That was a test that morning. But
So John, I think you justified the raise in the fee and also the online registration. I think you are a protector of this race. You have been since you've been on staff. This is a wonderful race. Donations, as Peter mentioned, it goes to local food pantries. I participated with my family. I've seen the needs for changes here. So I'm very supportive of your request. And as Kathy mentioned, we'll outreach and get that out there through our communications as best we can moving forward. So that's my personal feeling.
Do we allow like younger kids? Is their registration free or anything like that? Have we ever done that?
It's the same rate for everybody.
Okay.
We don't have a free registration. I mean, people, if they want to walk or run the race and not be involved, but basically we'd like everybody to be registered, but it's, yeah.
Thank you, John. We'll have to do this through a resolution. Resolution will be the higher elite feats and also for any distributions. So that'll be upcoming. If everyone's comfortable with that, we might even do that this Thursday, if not the first thing in September, just to make sure the department's ready and also all the mechanicals that we need as far as timing.
Yep.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you very much for the discussion,
Thanks, John.
thank you, John.
Have a good one.
That brings us up to our last discussion today, which is the draft plan for the Brooks Park management. And do we have Scott Wilson on the line?
He is coming right in right now.
Excellent. So we last discussed the draft management plan on July 11th. The board had a few changes that we had recommended, which have been incorporated. Some additional language. We struck some language. Board members, I believe, have all seen the most recent draft, and this is just the last step, I think, before we schedule for public hearing. So Scott, welcome. And if you can just run us through those adopted changes in the draft plan.
Be happy to. So we last met on July 11th. I'm pretty sure I got most of the changes that the board requested. I'm glad to go through them now. The first one being Brooks Park Historic Site. It was Brooks Park Art and Nature Center. Here, let's just stop right here on this number one. I did add that pagination the board requested.
Thank you.
Yes, always welcome to have pagination on any document.
The board also requested that we add in the appendices, we had acquired conditions assessments from both D.B. Bennett and from Jan Hurd, Pokorny Associates. And so those have been added. Those will also be a great opportunity to note what the structures looked like before we acquired them, when we acquired them, and post-acquisition. As David requested, which appears here as a mission, we moved a little bit further into our goals section of the plan, and you'll see that come up when I scroll down that far. Let's see, there weren't a great deal of changes. The board asked for a broader description of the site, which we've added. I relied on my Andes to help me do that. And here is where we moved it to general management plan goals and objectives. So it's not quite a mission, it's more a descriptive opportunity. We did change some wills, musts to shoulds, mays, cans. And I know at least one of you has probably got a couple more changes in that regard. We also, let's see, the only reason that this is highlighted is because now that we are going to be working with an historic consultant, I am not certain if in fact that they will work with New York State historic preservation offices. And I didn't want to be presumptive. It can stay, but I wasn't sure if they were particularly going to rely on that office or not. And so I just happened to highlight it as a point of discussion. I don't know if the board has an opinion on that. The last thing that we really changed on here is the addition for the property to be consistent with all of our other properties, and that basically stating that the property is open from dawn to dusk. I would ask the board, and I wasn't clear. I followed along the discussion. I rewatched it. However, there are structures on this property, and oftentimes, you know, if you're doing a poetry reading in December, for example, it does get dark quite early. Did the board want to make an exception for having that property available for anything at all in the evenings in the winter or not?
So I'm so sorry. Okay. So I would want it to be similar in nature, specifically almost to what I think Carl Fisher House is most recently, where property would be open dawn to dusk, unless permitted other times by the town board or licensee of the property.
Yeah, or you could do it by special event, chapter 151,
Sure.
where you get a special event permit because you want to go outside the management plan.
Yeah. Or town code, per town code.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll make that modification. Were there any other changes or questions with?
Yeah, Scott, we talked about this yesterday. I had two. One is on page 6 under goals and objectives.
Okay.
It currently states the primary goal is to restore the structures and maintain the grounds. We had talked about it back in July and throughout the management plan, we really used the word recreate. So I really think the primary goal is to recreate the structures and maintain the grounds.
Okay.
Or maybe restore / recreate, because some of them you may be reconstructing, and some of them you may just be restoring, right?
Yeah, I mean, we use recreate, like if you look at the working list of objectives, recreation, and so the word recreate is actually used throughout the document. I think that's the only place restore is used. So.
It's not a major point. I understand you're looking for the consistency there. It's just with regard to the actual structures, because there's been discussion about whether they're being restored or reconstructed, and some are and some aren't. Just maybe broad enough language to cover all of those.
Restore and or recreate?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then on page 7, Scott, at the top of the page, it's still under goals and objectives. In the middle of the first paragraph, it says, to tell the story, the center will provide exploration of native flora, fauna, and fungi and connect this to the site and to art practice. That's a very specific statement. I think it should be to tell the story, the center could provide exploration of native flora, fauna, and fungi. And then the paragraph below, where you, in many cases, you change the should to may. But I think in the middle of the paragraph, in addition to the residents, the park studio, it says can feature video screenings. It should be could feature.
Okay.
Again, the guest cottage, instead of can serve, could serve as a viewing blind for wildlife.
Okay.
And recreate, yeah, here we have the parks, the Brooks Park residents, you change the should to may in part recreate the couple's life. So those are the only things I had. Everything else looked great.
Yeah, I agree with those changes as well. Thank you, Kathy. With the highlighted sentence on page 8 under recommended improvements, I just wonder about the language there. Guidance and funding for planning and decision-making will be sought from New York State Historic Preservation. Are we seeking decision-making from New York State Historic Preservation or simply recommendations? Guidance, funding, and recommendation, planning recommendations?
I mean, if you're asking me, I'm not certain, which is why it's highlighted.
What does
Yeah,
decision-making mean?
Yeah, what does decision-making mean? Because I think we are not ceding our authority or control over this property to New York State Historic Preservation for any purpose in my mind, but.
Yeah, I think
Any
you could
opposition to
eliminate
striking this
that.
sentence?
So we just eliminate decision-making?
I think it's for, where we're looking for
and
guidance
funding
for
for
planning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Could also.
yeah.
Could instead of will?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I have. Anybody else? Any other?
No, I do not. Those are good points.
Board
No.
ready to move this forward for public hearing? We'll have a resolution on for Thursday.
Perfect. I'll make those changes and send it back to the board today.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. And that concludes our work session agenda items. We have liaison reports. Kathy, you have a report for us
Yeah,
today?
the focus of my liaison report today is going to be on human services, and I'd like to start with, the current senior center and the programs that we're offering. We're still doing Wellness 60 Plus, but we've just learned that Jackie Jackson is retiring, and Jackie Jackson has taught yoga to the seniors of East Hampton Town since the 1970s. Seniors have benefited from her chair and floor yoga classes for over the last 50 years. She has announced her retirement, and she will be greatly missed, and we now have the difficult task of filling her shoes. We're actually doing some outreach, and we're looking for any interested yoga teachers, and if folks who are out there and would like to teach a class once a week to our seniors here at East Hampton and possibly Montauk, we ask that they contact Diane Patrizio at the Human Services Department at 631-329-6939. We have a program, we're resuming after the summer, our Wellness 60 Plus program at Ashwell Hall. We're going to be offering 2 programs on Wednesdays. One is Qigong Dance 2, which has become very popular. It's recuperative exercises for increasing stamina, and it's choreographed very dance-like to help lubricate joints, increase stamina, and build coordination. That's at 1 o'clock. And then at 2 o'clock, we have osteoporosis prevention and stretching. And this is in conjunction with our Human Services Department and the YMCA. The program starts September 20th and runs through the end of the year. So we're going to be posting the flyer on the town website and hopefully get this out on social media. We also have a list of folks that participate in the program, and we'll be doing outreach to them as well. Next up is our senior nutrition program. So both the in-person congregate meal program and our grab and go programs have seen an increase in participation. We've got an average of 80 seniors attending the lunch program and 51 seniors picking up grab and go meals every Wednesday. Just to remind folks, the grab and go program takes place Wednesdays from 9 to 11. We ask that you call in advance to let us know that you're looking to pick up a meal. Folks will receive 5 frozen meals. They get bread, fresh fruit, and milk as well. And they just need to come to the center, and the staff will bring the meals to their cars. We'd also just like to remind folks that we've got a couple of other programs. One is the Senior Shopping Assistance Program, where we provide grocery shopping assistance to the 60-plus community. You call into the senior center. We take your order over the phone, the groceries will be delivered to your door, and we can also assist with unpacking the groceries. If seniors would prefer to do their own shopping, we can accompany them to the grocery store. And again, call the senior center for more information. We've also got our residential repair program. We're very excited. The gentleman that's Tom Allure, who's providing the assistance, has been very well received by the community, and we can help with installing and removing air conditioners, cleaning one-story home gutters, installing shade and curtain rods, minor repairs, handicap grab bars, so please, if you're in need of that service, reach out. And again, we have our senior transportation program where we provide transportation to Montauk and East Hampton nutrition programs, our wellness programs, medical appointments. And then if I segue to the new senior center, we'd like to post a sign on Abraham's Path in front of the property and let folks know that it's the future site of the center. This is the sign, the sign we've designed. Future home, Town of East Hampton Senior Center, 403 Abraham's Path, Amagansett. And we've got the site plan on the sign. We're looking to do a 3x5 sign, and I'm going to have a resolution on for Thursday to get that printed, and we'll get our buildings and grounds folks to get that installed for us. We're also, with the new center, we're working with the planning department and McLean on the secret documents so that we're ready to go back to the planning board. And in September, R2 will be back at a town board work session to go over the design development, where it'll be at about 60% when they come, and they'll be bringing a cost estimate. We haven't, though, picked a date yet in September. And then just lastly, as a follow-up to an item I had brought up last week after attending the Wainscott CAC, I had mentioned that there was confusion about how to file a complaint and plain noise, which is our system that we use, and about the other systems out there and what's available. I reached out to Jim Brundage, and Robert Grotel, who operates Plain Noise, is happy to come to a town board work session. I gave them the dates, September 12th, it would work for him. And he said if he does it via Zoom, he can, do a much more robust demonstration. So I just wanted to make sure the board was good with that, and we can invite Robert to the September 12th meeting. And then I had also brought up that we had never formally done a 2022 operations and complaints analysis, and the folks at the Wainscott CAC had brought that up. So I was hoping we could ask HMMH to give us a proposal so we could get that. I'm guessing they have at least they have all the operational data because they need it for the secret analysis.
Exactly.
It would mean they'd have to compile the noise complaints. But that would be helpful if we could just have that authorized. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy. David?
In the words of John Ryan Jr., Chief Lifeguard, they had a great competition at the 2023 National Lifeguard Championship in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Our, being the town's junior lifeguards, are top national competitors. Juniors do not keep team scores at nationals, but they did our best. East Hampton Town juniors would have been the champions. Sorry, but if they did, our East Hampton Town juniors would have been champions. First of all, they're champions already in our minds. All of our junior age groups made it through heats and into finals. Many of the events had multiple juniors at the top 10 and finished in the top 5. I believe we actually may have swept beach flags in the boys. Our U19 team, also non-team point scoring, were top competitors, breaking through the heats and making it into the final heats and finishing in the top 5. As far as the lifeguard nationals, the days were long, hot, and very competitive. It was clear that this year the East Coast agencies were there to take back the national title from the yearly domination of the LA County Lifeguard Association. Hampton Lifeguard Association, consisting of lifeguards from Southampton Town, beach clubs, East Hampton Town, East Hampton Village, and a few alumni. We were successful at making it through the heat and in many events into the finals. We had a number of medal winners events and top 10 finishes in beach flags, landline rescue, I think it's tort rescue, boat race and sprint relay. Boat race, nice. When the dust settled, Monmouth County won the national title. Hampton Lifeguard Association finished 9th place out of 26 teams, and also contributed in the Mid-Atlantic region, winning the national, which also contributed to the Mid-Atlantic region winning the national title. Thank you goes out to the town board for all their support in giving our juniors and lifeguards the opportunity to build on their open water skills and training to waterproof our waterfront community.
Very respectable results, and we're very proud of all of you who participate and keep our beaches safe.
Yeah, I agree. Two projects that are happening in Montauk right now, I want to let the board know, is at the Star Island Commercial Dock construction, the addendum to the contract has been signed. We have a construction schedule, and we're waiting on a start date for that. After that start date is released, I will notify the commercial fisheries leaseholders that have their slips there to let them know about the construction schedule and an update as we've already done in the past. Second is that we are going to be accepting the delivery of the increased size pump out tank that we have there. That was a water quality funding. We also got a grant for it, and doubles the capacity of our pump out tank. We're going to accept it, put it on site, but we're not going to install it until after the season because we don't want it to interfere with our current pump out notices right now. The Nature Preserve Committee also met last week. Two major points of discussion there. One of them was bamboo on town properties. How can we work on small patches of it within what we can do in-house, and then potentially if we have to go out to some other type of barriers or practices that we want to see instituted on there, could be very close to what we did with the Maloney property. We're looking at doing some of these on locations which might not need other DEC permits right now, so more properties are landlocked. There's more to come on that. Second of all, even though there was not a quorum there, there was a majority discussion about the Amagansett Plains management plan on there. And individuals were very comfortable with what's already been presented to the town board, but it's going to come back for another discussion per request of the town board. The business committee met. Also last week, I sat in as the interim liaison. The committee, there weren't as many members there. We're going to do a September meeting, but they were very interested. I think Eric Shantz and also Jeremy Samuelson from Housing and Planning to come in to discuss a lot about the grant intake that we took, also how that might affect the business community, and then also about the affordable housing changes that we have made recently. Also, they're going to come back and we're going to redo the whole thing with hopefully a greater number of committee members present. I met with the members of the Camp Hero Sewer District in Montauk last week. We had maybe a little over 20 participants there, representing nearly probably 11 or 12 different households out of the district. Tom Lembo, who is our wastewater engineering consultant, Kim Shaw, Eric Shantz, Melissa Winslow, myself, presented options for them to potentially discuss if they wanted to add IA systems to their current systems already. There's engineering challenges and changes that would go place. There is some changes in funding that would have to happen. It's not a project that they have to do, but it's a project that started about 3 years ago. And I wanted to make sure once we got the information to the town board, if we paid for it, let's present it to them. No decisions were made. I told them to take it back. We answered a lot of questions. They really enjoyed that outreach, asking the questions with the engineer there, with the town and such, knowing the uses of CPF funding, what they've had in the past. As we all know, there's a history out there with that system. And they're going to take it back, discuss it with themselves, and they might come back to the town or not. But it was an open outreach, and it was actually a very good discussion overall then too. So I thank those participants for that community to come out and give us the respect to show that to have that discussion with them, and we're open for more questions. Lastly, 395 Panago project has received preliminary site plan approval. And that was on Wednesday. Yep, it's a yay moment. It's a milestone moment. And we're going to continue ahead, hopefully have final subdivision approval potentially by early September. And we're going to continue moving forward, meeting and discussing DOT curb cuts and such. And we see formal action being taken on that potentially in October. So that's what I got.
Great.
Great, thank you, David. Kate?
Yes, I'm going to be very brief. Most of my committees are meeting this week. Spring CAC meets tonight for anybody who would like to join at Ashmore Hall at 6 p.m. The South Fork Wind, all of the foundations now have been installed. That part of the offshore build is completed. Next in line is the installation of the actual wind turbines. So weather permitting, the wind farm is still on target for a fourth quarter 2023 energization. Is that the right word? To be energized at the end of this year. We're in the zoning.
Repeat that?
So the foundations have been
Yeah, so
installed.
energized by end
The
of
substation's been installed.
The substation has been installed and all the energizing tests have been completed. The
Yeah.
cable's been installed, all of the testing on it has been completed. And now the foundations for the turbines that installation has
Right.
been completed. Next step is putting on the wind turbines onto the foundations. The cable has been tested. That's running out to the foundations. This offshore substation has been tested.
Great.
And now they're still on track for a fourth quarter of 2023 this year. Energization.
That's
Turning
great. Okay, thank you.
Another yay.
Yeah, it's great. Weather dependent. So I'm going to not quit. The zoning code amendment group is in the process of analyzing data that we've amassed in that committee. And we have begun putting out intercommittee surveys. And we are on track to presenting recommendations in September of this year or the first meeting in October. So that's the update on that. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Peter.
The Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee met last night, and I was unable to attend due to a previous engagement, but I will give the report on their meeting at our next work session. I've completed all the budget meetings with the town department heads and with the town budget officer leading into development of this year's budget. That's a major first step. We are also having meetings next week with both the CSEA for their contract negotiations as well as PBA. So we'll continue to work through the budget numbers and again are still on schedule for the release of that in end of September. Let's see. Tomorrow, we will have Governor Hochul visiting us. She will be here to attend, to come to the Lighthouse for a review of the completion of the revetment there, which was a multi-decade effort. I think it spans over 25 years from initial planning to completion. However, the work was completed nearly a year ahead of time. So that was welcome because now surfcasters will be able to go down there this fall for the autumn run. That effort included the federal government, state, the town, and Montauk Historical all working together. This project will help ensure that the most iconic image of Long Island, the Montauk Lighthouse, will be around for generations to come. That is a highly erosive environment. And that is the location where the sun first rises on New York every day. So it's a beautiful spot. Again, it's such a big part of our history, originally commissioned by President George Washington. I think it was 1796 when the lighthouse was built. Alexander Hamilton was Secretary of Commerce, and he was really what instigated the whole lighthouse system to improve commerce to the new budding colony. So there's so much history here. Montauk Historical Society will have a formal ribbon cutting for the renovations at the Montauk Lighthouse. The structure has been regrouted and repainted, again ensuring that the actual physical structure will continue to inspire the imagination of those for many years come. We are and have been since June in hurricane season. But as you all know, that the predictions have been changed recently with an increased likelihood of storms in the Atlantic Basin. Historically, our storms usually come in September and beyond. Certainly one could come any time during the summer from June on. I'm asking the Bruce Bates to come to our next work session so that we can do a public presentation to remind residents and visitors alike to be prepared for hurricane season, what kind of preparations that they can undertake to make them in a better situation if we were to have the unfortunate event of a storm coming to us. And just to go over what the town's emergency responses are to ensure that our town departments are properly situated as well going into the season. So those protocols are, being instituted, and we'll have a public presentation of that. I guess it's the September 5th work session. And that's all I have for now.
Great. I have a couple of resolutions. I'd like to offer Resolution 2023-1126. This is a list appointment provisional for Linda Norris. She is hereby appointed to the position of Assistant Director of Housing in the Housing Community Development Department from list mentioned here, with no charge to hourly rate or budget office effective August 4th, 2023. Probationary period for this position is 26 months. Weeks.
Second.
Apologize.
All in
26
favor?
weeks.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, pass carried.
1127 is a list appointment from provisional for Eric Shantz. Eric Shantz is hereby appointed to the position of Director of Housing in the Housing Community Development Department from the following list, and no change to hourly rate or budget account, retroactive to August 4th. Probationary period for this is also 26 weeks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, pass carried.
1128 is a status change from temporary to part-time office assistant for Jenny Munoz. That's effective August 14th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
1129 is terminate seasonal recreational employee for 2023, effective 8/17/2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
1130 is the terminate seasonal parks employees for 2023, titles, names, and dates below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
1131 is the approved change order number 2 for the Thruma Harbor stormwater. This is again, it was a stormwater abatement contract that was for Fairway and Soak Heights project, where there was most recently damaged during a storm event. The proposed change order for this would be $13,827.50. And this would be for stormwater change order number 2 for Green Velvet Landscapes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
1132 is South Lake Montauk Engineering Design, change order number 1. Where the town hired PW Grosser Consulting to design the South Lake stormwater abatement restoration work. The town did not request them to actually design for the IA system for that bathroom, where this change order in the amount of $2,500 will go towards additional design efforts and meetings as listed above to change to the IA system.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
1133, it's a budget modification for CPF for the CA account. We're increasing it for $12 million in the revenue line for appropriate unreserved surplus, and we're increasing $12 million also in the land acquisition line. The financial impact is $12 million moved from one CPF account to another.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass and carried.
I have Resolution 1134, which is the approval of a request for funding submission for solar canopy at the Town Hall parking lot. Whereas the town plans to undertake a project at Town Hall for engineering costs associated with the construction of a solar canopy, whereas the town estimates the cost projected at $5,000. The town sought grant funding in the amount of $5,000 from the Clean Energies Communities Review Team to subsidize the estimated cost. Be it resolved that the town of East Hampton approves the submittal of a letter of intent for consideration to the Clean Energies Communities Review Team, grant opportunity in the amount of $5,000 for engineering costs associated with the construction of a solar canopy at Town Hall campus lot. That the letter was submitted on June 28th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass and carried.
I have an additional resolution is 1135, and that's a change status from temporary to part-time office assistant for Jocelyn Calais Chimbo. Jocelyn was appointed to temporary office assistant in the planning department, and her services are now needed on a part-time basis. Resolved that Jocelyn Chimbo is hereby appointed to a part-time office assistant in the planning department with no change in hourly rate or budget account effective August 14th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass and carried. Resolution 1136 is a status change from temporary to part-time office assistant, Madison Liebman, and that will be effective August 14th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried. Any other resolutions or matters to bring before the board? I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss CPF, personnel, litigation, leases, and real estate.
5 seconds.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Shall we reconvene an exec at 2 o'clock?
That's fine.
Great. Thank you so much. Stay safe.